Hello and welcome to Wrestling Trope Alert, the channel where we analyze professional wrestling. If this is your first time here, help the channel by clicking the subscribe button. This video chronicles the entire DDP vs Undertaker rivalry, starting with the debut of Diamond Dallas Page in May 2001 as the Stalker of the Undertaker's wife. Then we will take a look at the involvement of DDP and the Undertaker with the Alliance Invasion storyline. And finally, we will analyze the build to the Summerslam 2001 Tag Team Cage match, featuring Chris Kanyon and DDP against the Brothers of Destruction, Kane and The Undertaker. In March of 2001, WCW folded, leaving large numbers of wrestlers unemployed.
Showtime, folks!
WCW's biggest competitor, the WWE, would acquire WCW's assets and its intellectual property. And in the years that followed, almost all of the wrestlers in the WCW roster would appear for Vince McMahon's company, the WWE. One of those wrestlers was Diamond Dallas Page, a wrestler that managed to ascend to main event level status despite WCW's inability to build new stars. DDP was not an ordinary wrestler. Having made his debut for WCW at the age of 35, he was something of an anomaly in the professional wrestling business. And despite the late start, DDP managed to become a strong fan favorite with the fans of the fallen brand, due to his strong work ethic, great look, charisma, and the awesome finishing move, the Diamond Cutter. DDP also found himself in high-profile, high-publicity matches, teaming with mainstream celebrities such as Karl Malone and Jay Leno. In WCW, DDP was a 4-time World Tag Team Champion, a 2-time United States Champion, and DDP would also capture the Big Gold Belt on 3 separate occasions.
As we celebrate DDP's third reign!
In May of 2001, Undertaker was enjoying a career resurgence. Undertaker was reinventing himself after a decade of destruction portraying the Dead Man. This new Undertaker gimmick, dubbed the American Badass, had started earlier in '99, but then the Undertaker got injured and he would be forced to miss 8 months of in-ring competition. Undertaker would use this forced time off to get married to a woman named Sara Frank, and the Badass Undertaker would give his new bride the lamest wedding gift ever. Undertaker would make his triumphant return to the WWE on the May 21, 2000 pay-per-view, Judgment Day. Towards the end of the 60-minute Triple H vs The Rock match, Undertaker would return riding a motorcycle to the ring and proceeding to clean house. After his career-defining gimmick change and a new tattoo of a yet unknown woman on his neck, Undertaker would be more vocal in the microphone and he would start to have storylines more grounded in reality, distancing himself from supernatural themes. During this era, The Undertaker and his kayfabe brother Kane were friendly towards each other, and Kane would come to the aid of his brother Undertaker when needed. Right before The Undertaker's rivalry with DDP, Undertaker would challenge unsuccessfully the heel Stone Cold for his WWE Championship, a storyline in which the mischievous Stone Cold played mind games with The Undertaker by threatening The Undertaker's family. In that storyline, the WWE plays an angle in which The Undertaker is deceived into thinking that his wife has been in a car wreck. The thought of his wife severely injured in the hospital sends the American Badass into a frenzy, and eventually WWE Creative decides to further incorporate Undertaker's new wife Sara into The Undertaker's next rivalry, further distancing the Undertaker character from the Dead Man persona and grounding the Undertaker character in reality. This weird storyline starts on the May 28th episode of Monday Night Raw. In the beginning of the broadcast, longtime commentator of the flagship show Raw, Jim Ross, mentions that he received an anonymous letter delivered by courier.
Someone gave me a
Jim Ross tells the audience that the letter mentions that the Undertaker's wife would be revealed later on the Raw broadcast, and an hour later the greasy one Paul Heyman and Jim Ross are interrupted by a random recording of a young blonde woman brushing her hair, in the privacy of what must be her home. A deep, distorted, ominous voice introduces Sara.
This is the Undertaker's wife, Sara.
And the creepy voice also warns that there's more to come.
Oh yeah, Sara. We'll be seeing a lot more of you.
Fun fact, wrestling YouTuber Wrestling Bios actually corrected the pitch of the audio recording, and turns out that the Stalker's voice is actually the voice of Vince McMahon.
Out of curiosity, I ripped the voice and fixed the pitch, as I was wondering if it was really DDP who was doing the voiceovers. First voice you will hear is what was aired on TV, and the second bit of audio is the real voice with the pitch fixed.
This is the Undertaker's wife, Sara.
This is the Undertaker's wife, Sara.
In the privacy of her own home, combing her beautiful blonde hair.
In the privacy of her own home, combing her beautiful blonde hair.
So yeah, it was Vince McMahon doing the voiceovers.
More Stalker footage would air on the following SmackDown broadcast. There's a replay of Sara brushing her hair, followed by footage showing The Undertaker and Sara roaming around their luscious estate in quad bikes. On the very next Raw, Undertaker arrives in his red custom bike, Limp Bizkit's role in place, and the angry American badass comes out to the ring to address this Stalker footage. The Undertaker is angry and warns the anonymous Stalker that his death wish is about to come true.
Somebody's got a death wish, and their wish is about to come true.
In this promo, we are given another dimension in the complex character that is The Undertaker. Gone are the dark supernatural themes from years prior, and The Undertaker is now a man who just wants to protect his family. The Undertaker then turns detective and figures out that if Jim Ross was the one who received the first communication from this anonymous stalker, Ross must know something more. Undertaker proceeds to question Jim Ross, but eventually comes to trust good old JR's word that he was just a messenger. Then Heyman tries to intervene, and Heyman gets smacked after he telegraphs the obvious slap he's about to receive. Heyman falls, and then Ross directs The Undertaker to the man in charge.
Talk to Mr. McMahon.
Then more footage of Sara plays, and Sara is now all alone at the family home petting her dogs, with the Stalker implying that Sara is in danger.
Sara's going inside, where she thinks it's safe.
At this point, The Undertaker should head straight to the production truck and confront the head of TV production Kevin Dunn as to why is this footage being aired at all. But obviously that doesn't happen because fuck logic. A seething Undertaker then finds Vince McMahon, the king of sports entertainment, who rejects any amount of involvement with this subject. And points the finger at his own offspring, Shane McMahon.
And I'm talking about Shane McMahon.
Shane McMahon at this time is the leader of the former WCW wrestlers that have been invading the WWE product.
I now own WCW.
And Shane, earlier in the broadcast, was also the author of a WCW logo flashing in the middle of a Kane vs Edge match. The logic here is that Shane must also be the one that's been managing to get the Stalker footage on the air. So Shane is in the WWE's production truck doing whatever he pleases and no one objects. Again, fuck logic. All of this could have been avoided entirely by just having The Undertaker receive the footage in the form of VHS tapes in the arena and then do as the WWE often does. Have The Undertaker watch it on a VHS tape backstage, and this VHS tape could then be randomly discovered backstage by a multitude of wrestlers. And The Undertaker would then have a reason to be on camera as he questions / beats up the poor souls who happen to discover tapes backstage addressed to The Undertaker. That would make sense, but instead the WWE decides to disregard logic, and The Undertaker now has another clue. The Stalker footage is now showing Sara returning from a shopping spree, spending that sweet Undertaker money. The Stalker admires Sara's figure and continues to be creepy.
She has a nice figure.
Yes, that's still Vince McMahon admiring The Undertaker's wife.
Cringe.
Undertaker is waiting for Shane to show up in the parking lot. A limo pulls up and Taker threatens the unknown individual inside. Moments later, Shane is walking backstage and comes across Kane. Then Shane meets the door courtesy of our favorite wrestler named Mark. Undertaker beats the crap out of Shane while Shane denies any responsibility. And then Kane is unintentionally funny and says,
I can smell the stench of deceit here.
Kane believes Shane's innocence despite Shane being the conniving leader of the invading WCW faction, without any evidence to support or deny his claim. A distraught Undertaker then punches a shiny arena and sits on the floor feeling lost. The Undertaker has no leads and the story continues on Raw. Shane is now thanking Kane for saving his ass from The Undertaker. Side note, at this time Shane is also in a rivalry with Kurt Angle, and both men have a match at the following pay-per-view. The conniving Shane decides to use this opportunity to get back at Angle, and points to Angle as being involved in this Stalker business. And Shane's reasoning being that Angle screwed her sister Stephanie's marriage with Triple H. So he must be also trying to screw The Undertaker's marriage with Sara, because Angle apparently is a home wrecker.
I can smell the stench of deceit here.
Minutes later, Angle is in the middle of the ring, insulting the audience as usual.
It makes me sick whenever I step foot in Richmond, Virginia.
Undertaker shows up and questions Angle. Angle defends himself in the worst way possible.
First of all, I met your wife once. I didn't even find her attractive. I didn't even like her.
Causing The Undertaker to give Angle a last ride. The Stalker uses this opportunity to show yet another video, and this time the Stalker is inside Sara's hotel room and leaves a message for Sara. Undertaker sprints away back to his wife and Shane shows up to deliver an angle slam to Kurt Angle and then disappears into the crowd. Shane merely used Kane and The Undertaker to get back at Angle. This time, Kane couldn't smell the stench of the seat. Continuing this train wreck of a story, the Stalker footage of The Undertaker's hotel room is replayed on the following SmackDown, and The Undertaker is going to wrestle Kurt Angle. And why, might you ask? Because Angle is insulted that The Undertaker assaulted him earlier in the week. That's why. Cue the Limp Bizkit and here comes Undertaker in his sweet red custom bike, and the Olympic hero follows scared shitless. Angle pleads with the American Badass, insults the audience as usual, and proceeds to go to the ring with strong intentions. Undertaker wrestles with intent and determination, a man possessed with anger for the yet unknown Stalker who is stalking his beloved wife Sara. Eventually, the Undertaker loses his temper and goes for the steel steps, which causes referee Tim White to disqualify the Undertaker, and as usual, the WWE books themselves into a corner. Angle couldn't lose clean to The Undertaker because Angle is in a match with the boss's son Shane McMahon 10 days later on pay-per-view, and Angle must be kept strong ahead of that match. And The Undertaker is too valuable to lose by pinfall in a random match on SmackDown. But The Undertaker has to deliver a chokeslam and the last ride to give the fans their money's worth. Cue the perennial jobber team of X Factor, Undertaker delivers his signature finishing moves, leaves on his custom bike, and everyone is happy. Later in the broadcast, while Test is backstage being interviewed by Kevin Kelly, the Stalker uses a screen behind them to show Sara, now accompanied by a security guard being watched by the Stalker.
Sarah's hiding out. Undertaker, there is no protection from me.
The identity of the Stalker would be revealed on the June 18th episode of Monday Night Raw. Jim Ross is commenting on the Stalker business and mentions that The Undertaker is home with his wife, and then the WWE replays some of the Stalker's footage. Later in the broadcast, The Undertaker's team plays, but spoiler alert, The Undertaker, it is not. A masked individual comes out on The Undertaker's bike, does the signature Undertaker hand raising, takes off his mask in the coolest way possible, and ta-da! It's Diamond Dallas Page! and Diamond Dallas Page rejoices in adoration by the people. DDP has some explaining to do, however. Turns out DDP's motivation was to make an impact, and for DDP, the best way to make an impact on the WWE is go after the baddest man in the land.
If you want to make an impact, go after the biggest, meanest, baddest dog in the yard. The big dog.
Wrestling trope alert moment and the basis for at least 87% of storylines involving wrestlers in the WWE. The old tired trope of a debuting wrestler targeting an established wrestler to gain notoriety. DDP then says something interesting. DDP calls back to The Undertaker's rivalry with Stone Cold a month earlier. And DDP explains that his motivation for going after The Undertaker's wife was something that The Undertaker said to Austin.
When you told Stone Cold Steve Austin that if he ever messed with your family, you'd make him famous.
I can smell the stench of the seat here.
I've already warned him once. Mess with my family and I will hurt you.
If you're lying to me, I'm gonna rip your heart out.
And you better give your soul to the Lord, because your ass belongs to me.
This resonated with DDP, who smelled weakness on The Undertaker. Hooray for continuity. Then DDP mocks The Undertaker for being afraid and turns The Undertaker's catchphrase,
I will make you famous.
around, and DDP says that he's responsible for making The Undertaker's wife famous.
Diamond Dallas Page has made your wife Sara famous.
And this is also a wrestling trope alert moment. Every single time someone has a catchphrase, the lowest man on the totem pole uses that catchphrase against the more established wrestler.
The book has come back to Utah. This isn't the house that AJ Styles built. I'm next.
DDP wants confrontation at the King of the Ring pay-per-view and begs The Undertaker to make him famous.
Nobody deserves to be more famous than me.
This sucks because to us wrestling fans, DDP was already famous, but because this is the WWE and Vince McMahon firmly believes that his audience is unaware of anything outside of the WWE product, DDP, who is a former WCW talent, has to back the established WWE talent to make him famous. Because in the eyes of Vince McMahon, no one who watches the WWE watches WCW.
Life sucks, and then you die.
At this point you would think that a match would be booked for the King of the Ring pay-per-view, but that wouldn't be the case. There's a loose confirmation of some sort of confrontation at the King of the Ring pay-per-view, but strangely, a match is never actually announced. Then, conveniently, security shows up right after DDP is done making his point, and DDP abandons Undertaker's custom red bike in the ring area and leaves through the audience. The Stalker storyline continues, the villain is now defined, and now we see how The Undertaker reacts to the news that his wife Stalker is former WCW superstar Diamond Dallas Page. In the middle of the broadcast, The Undertaker in his best motorcycle gang member cosplay is pacing back and forth awaiting in the parking lot. This time The Undertaker is not alone. His lovely wife Sara is here with him, and this is Sara's debut for the WWE.
What is The Undertaker gonna do to Page when he arrives here?
Later in the broadcast, as the night rolls in, a limo pulls up. Undertaker pounces on the vehicle and turns out that the person inside the limo is Vince McMahon, who is apologizing profusely and claiming that he's doing his corporate job and is taking steps to keep DDP outside of the arena. The Undertaker, however, wants exactly the opposite. Undertaker wants DDP around so he can hurt DDP. Even later in the broadcast and still in the parking lot, Taker and his lovely wife are still waiting for DDP. Undertaker then turns his frustrations on some innocent pallets, and The Undertaker almost gets hit by one of them. Towards the end of the broadcast, Undertaker and Sara finally abandon the parking lot area and go inside the arena. Awaiting for them is the Undertaker's brother Kane, who voices his support for the Undertaker.
I got your back, man.
The Undertaker and his lovely wife would make their entrance into the arena. Undertaker paces back and forth, showered in adoration by the people. Then the Undertaker cuts a promo channeling Vince McMahon's point of view.
Who in the hell is Diamond Dallas Page?
This is also a wrestling trope alert moment. During this era, when the former WCW superstars would meet their new WWE foes for the first time, the common disingenuous insult was to deny being aware of the former WCW superstar.
Who in the blue hell are you?
Undertaker then calls DDP a pervert for peeking in the windows of his ranch, and Undertaker is pissed off for the outrageous violation of the Undertaker's privacy.
And you peep in the windows at my wife like some kind of pervert.
Undertaker vows to make DDP pay for his transgressions at the King of the Ring pay-per-view. DDP then appears on the Titantron because he has satellite tracking technology, and goes on to make the Stalker edition of MTV Cribs, going through Sara's underwear and then lying on the couple's bed. An irate Undertaker seeds in hate for the future Yoga Master, and this continues on pay-per-view 3 days later. 20 minutes into the King of the Ring pay-per-view, DDP would make his entrance to the audience, preemptively auditioning to be a member of the Shield. Then DDP would go onto the ring and cut a promo. DDP goes on to say that he has more R-rated footage of the Undertaker's lovely wife.
The stuff I have of your wife Sara, stuff right there gets more than just a thumbs up.
And then proceeds to threaten the Undertaker with an ass whooping.
DDP comes into your house and kicks the big dog's ass. The big dog.
Then, because the WWE already has the people's money for this pay-per-view, DDP plugs the WWE's presence the following night at Madison Square Garden.
Tomorrow on Raw in Madison Square Garden.
DDP then shows his ticket, his sign, and then DDP sits in the crowd, and throughout the broadcast DDP is shown sitting in the audience awaiting for the Undertaker. Eventually the greasy one Paul Heyman would interview DDP, and Undertaker and Sara would use this opportunity to turn the tables on DDP, and DDP's privacy is now breached. And an irate DDP is frustrated with the blatant invasion of privacy.
I don't find it amusing at all. Anybody taking after my personal life.
Then DDP puts up his sign, and there's the Undertaker to show his face.
I'm begging you, make me famous!
A few moments later, more footage airs. DDP is now shown leaving a building and walking to his vehicle. An hour later, DDP is still seated in the front row in the audience, begging the Undertaker to finally make him famous. DDP eventually gets tired of waiting, and after footage of DDP arriving at the site of the King of the Ring pay-per-view, the Continental Airlines Arena, DDP loses his composure, heads to the ring, and speaks on the microphone. DDP issues a challenge to the Undertaker, and more footage shows DDP walking backstage, and Sara reveals she was DDP's voyeur.
That's right, it's me, Sara.
And the Undertaker makes his entrance, brooding to deliver a beating of epic proportions to the future CEO of DDP Yoga. Undertaker puts on his gloves, climbs the stairs, and the punching game begins. DDP is the first one to fall down, then the Undertaker in the corner stomps on DDP. DDP low blows the Undertaker, some punches by DDP on the Undertaker, Taker fights back and punches DDP out of the ring, and the silly stuff begins. Because here comes the Undertaker's wife Sara with the best in early 2000s home video camera technology in hand. Sara is recording her husband's epic beatdown on DDP with her own camera, side by side with WWE's own cameraman. This is some weird shit. This whole being filmed without someone's authorization only works if you are not filming a TV show already. The beating continues. Undertaker dismantles DDP on the ring outside area. DDP manages to get a steel chair, delivers a couple of shots, then Undertaker spears DDP on top of the announce desk. Moments later, back in the ring, Undertaker foot stomps DDP. DDP falls out of the ring, crawls to Sara, both men go back in the ring as DDP begs for clemency. Another foot stomp to the outside, and DDP flees through the audience. And this is how the first month of DDP's rivalry with The Undertaker went. After beating the crap out of DDP at the King of the Ring pay-per-view, WWE's booking decides to tag The Undertaker once again with his brother Kane, who at the time was the Intercontinental Champion. The two men, collectively known as the Brothers of Destruction, challenged the tag team champions, the Dudley Boyz, for the titles, but failed to capture them because Albert, better known as Lord Tensai,
Look at this power and total domination. Oh, man.
Let's just get this over with.
Heaven. Seems like Akabono crossed with the Bunny Ranch.
Cringe.
interferes in the match. WWE does the usual screwjob finish to protect everyone. Bubba gets a choke slam after the bell rings to make the audience happy. And then as The Undertaker and his lovely wife Sara are leaving, they are ambushed on the top of the ramp by DDP, who proceeds to rip some locks of hair from Sara's head. This rivalry is far from ending, and from this point on, things would get even weirder. Undertaker and Sara would then be interviewed by Jim Ross on the following SmackDown. Undertaker is visibly angry, and this is probably the first time that The Undertaker was referred to by his real name.
Mark didn't ask for any of this.
And only Sara would speak in this short segment, because logic.
I am the baddest. Traumatized? He should be careful what he wishes for. Because everybody's more famous when they're dead. I didn't ask for any of this.
Cringe.
Also in this episode, Kane loses his Intercontinental Championship to Prince Albert. And if you don't know what a Prince Albert is, don't Google it, or else you will be scarred for life. Kane loses the title, but he doesn't get a rematch. Instead, The Undertaker would challenge Prince Albert for the Intercontinental Championship. As usual, this match would end in disqualification. After The Undertaker's chokeslam, DDP would deliver a chair to The Undertaker's back, followed by a diamond cutter. DDP is now leaving, and Sara follows. A vulnerable Sara is now at the mercy of DDP. Undertaker's brother Kane is here to save the day. From behind, Kane stops DDP from hurting Sara. Kane delivers some vicious strikes to DDP. Sara then kicks DDP square in the family jewels. And then Kane drives DDP back to The Undertaker. Undertaker punches DDP a couple of times. Albert interferes and gets driven outside the ring as DDP flees the ring area. DDP's first actual match would happen on SmackDown against also former WCW alumni Booker T. Booker T was the WCW champion and also a heel, so WWE is having a heel versus heel WCW match because logic. Ahead of this match, DDP would berate a random referee, questioning the poor soul about the whereabouts of The Undertaker and his wife Sara, while trying to get his finishing move, the Diamond Cutter, over.
My Diamond Cutter is sharper than ever.
Moments later, DDP comes out with his self-high-five babyface gimmick shtick. Booker comes out right after. And both men exchange blows until DDP goes for a chair. DDT by DDP on the chair. Undertaker shows up to distract DDP because nobody ever wins or loses without interference on free TV. And then DDP flees the ring area with The Undertaker on his tail. Moments later, The Undertaker is shown in the parking lot area. And it seems that during this time, 50% of The Undertaker's screen time is in parking lots. And Chana, it's an ambush.
You guys couldn't get tickets?
The invasion storyline is underway, and that storyline is here to stain this lovely rivalry between DDP and The Undertaker. The WCW faithful gangs up on The Undertaker. Then Shane, who up until this point was portrayed as being the leader of the WCW wrestlers, also shows up and gets beaten down by the WCW faithful along with their champion Booker T. This raises the question, why would the WCW guys beat their apparent leader? Why are there so many parking lot segments during this era? Why is DDP wearing those fancy shoes? Maybe we'll find out next week. Spoiler alert, we won't. And it will be as if this didn't happen. Because... logic. DDP has a match with Shane scheduled for this Raw broadcast, and The Undertaker is wrestling two of WCW's faithful. And these matches would stand for about 20 seconds, because after Shane does his entrance, The Undertaker shows up and takes the match away from Shane, because The Undertaker wants a piece of DDP's behind. DDP comes out, chair in hand, heads to the ring, swings his chair at the ropes, and Shane props up his candlestick. Back in the ring, DDP and The Undertaker trade blows on different corners. Then as The Undertaker goes for his chokeslam, Shane attacks The Undertaker from behind with vicious candlestick strikes. And The Undertaker eventually reverses the attack, goes for the last ride on Shane, and DDP then strikes The Undertaker with a chair to the back. Shane and DDP apparently are in cahoots with each other, because... logic. Sara strikes Shane, DDP gives a diamond cutter to The Undertaker's wife, Undertaker then tries to cover his wife in an attempt to shield her from further harm. Shane and DDP then leave the arena the best of friends. So Shane and Booker T got their ass handed to them in a vicious brawl 4 days earlier for nothing, because... logic. DDP leaves The Undertaker's wife Sara in dire straits, and Sara gets transported to the local medical facility. And the BFFs Shane and DDP use this opportunity to steal The Undertaker's custom bike from the backstage area. DDP struggles to start the bike and almost crashes against some innocent bystanders.
You have a great let's go.
Cringe.
Also in the broadcast, the ECW faithful would make their first appearance and lay waste to the WWE wrestlers. And Swerve City, ECW and WCW join forces, and they would be referred to as the Alliance. This is where Shane becomes the de facto villain of this situation, along with Stephanie McMahon, who gets added as the new ECW owner, and the circle of McMahon nepotism that surrounds every major storyline is complete. This is a wrestling trope alert moment, specifically a WWE exclusive trope. The McMahon's involvement with storylines is constant and has always been silly and unnecessary.
All of that is going to change, and it starts tonight.
I can smell the stench of deceit here.
WWE would now shift The Undertaker's rivalry with DDP from personal to corporate. The July pay-per-view would change its name from Fully Loaded to Invasion, and the war between the WWE and the Alliance, now composed of former ECW and WCW alumni, would escalate ahead of that pay-per-view. This all-out war between the Alliance and the WWE would culminate in a series of matches pitting the Alliance talent against the WWE talent, main event by what would be dubbed the Inaugural Brawl, and this match would be a 5-on-5 tag team match pitting the WWE wrestlers against the Alliance, with The Undertaker and Austin leading the WWE team and DDP and Booker T leading the Alliance side of things. Earlier in the broadcast, Vince McMahon pleads with The Undertaker to help in the fight against the Alliance. Moments later, Shane cuts a promo in the ring, flanked by DDP and Booker T. Shane and DDP are wrestling The Undertaker and Kurt Angle. The other half of the Alliance, headed by Stephanie McMahon, shows up with her ECW army in tow. Then in the ring, the greasy one Paul Heyman and the $1 Billion Princess would cut promos promising the downfall of the WWE. This alone proves how unnecessary the involvement of Stephanie McMahon is. Heyman, who is a great promo and a charismatic leader, could carry the entire ECW faithful on his back and be great at it.
This ain't SmackDown! This ain't Monday Night Raw! This ain't WCW! This ain't even WWE! This, my friends, is ECW! This is such good shit!
But because this is a WWE, a McMahon needs to be shoved in every story because logic. Moments later, Vince McMahon, the owner of the WWE, is speaking to his troops, encouraging his greatest wrestlers to rally behind the WWE banner and fight the evil invaders. Then Vince McMahon and Steve Austin join each other in the ring to discuss this alliance business. Some friction would happen between Austin and Vince McMahon. Austin had been portraying the bad guy, and Austin takes offense to Vince's words and decides to walk out on Vince, and by extension the WWE, against the alliance. This would play a part in the war against the alliance, as the absence of Austin would heavily favor the alliance. Moments later, Shane and DDP are backstage with Stephanie strategizing on their match with The Undertaker. The WWE faithful also discuss their match strategy, and Angle attempts to assert his dominance, which The Undertaker quickly dismantles.
I'm the leader of this team. I should be the captain. Alright, you can be the leader for tonight.
The strategy here is for Kane and Jericho to keep watch for the alliance while the match goes on in the ring. Angle makes his entrance, Undertaker follows. Fun fact, 2 weeks earlier, Angle had called The Undertaker's wife Sara ugly.
First of all, I met your wife once. I didn't even find her attractive.
Shane and DDP make their entrance, then DDP deceives Shane, who runs to the ring alone and gets beat down by The Undertaker and Angle as DDP watches. Shane would get dismantled for quite some time, and DDP would only interfere when Angle would put the ankle lock on Shane. Undertaker then chases DDP away, DDP gets tagged in, delivers some violence to Angle and power bombs Angle. Later in the match, Undertaker gets tagged in and brings the pain to DDP. Undertaker chokeslam DDP, and then Shane interrupts and pays with a last ride. Then Angle has DDP on the ankle lock, but The Undertaker wants DDP all to himself. Conveniently, the WCW faithful floods the ring. Wrestling trope alert, because this is the point in a match where a finish is needed, but because the WWE constantly books themselves into corners, nobody gets pinned and the match ends in disqualification. Undertaker and Angle stand their ground, then The Undertaker flies high above the top rope and takes out the Alliance members, but their numbers are too great to overcome. Kane and Jericho would come to the rescue, but then the ECW half of the Alliance would show up and proceed to dismantle the WWE members. Undertaker is selling the devastating offensive, then out of desperation, Taker manages to grab DDP's neck, but then The Undertaker gets overpowered and eats a diamond cutter. On the following Raw broadcast, Rhyno and DDP are scheduled to wrestle the Brothers of Destruction. Side note, Rhyno is only 25 years old. DDP tells Rhyno that he wants to do a private screening of his voyeuristic footage of The Undertaker's wife Sara. In his hand is the classic blue case VHS tape that I have seen being used in other storylines. The Alliance shenanigans continue as the Alliance rallies backstage. Shane, Stephanie and the greasy one Paul Heyman are giving a cringe-inducing speech to the troops.
We have nothing left but all of you.
Yeah!
Take out the WWF forever.
Yeah!
Hey, after this Sunday, there is no tomorrow.
Yeah! Are you with us? Yeah! 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 Yeah!
Cringe.
And DDP is shown seething in anticipation of his later confrontation with The Undertaker, desperately trying to make this horrendous storyline work. On the other front of this war, The Undertaker takes the lead and speaks to the WWE troops in front of Perry Saturn and his Moppy. And also in this room is R-Truth, who was known at the time as K-Quick.
My bad. I don't want Brock to take me to Sioux Falls City.
With R-Truth up in an F5 center of the ring.
Then the WWE rolls out Classy Freddy Blassie to rally the troops even further. Fun fact, Classy Freddy Blassie legit gimmick was to file down his teeth to bite his opponents in the forehead, causing them to bleed. Now that's commitment. Side note, Freddy Blassie would get a verbal beatdown at the very end of that night's broadcast. Stephanie and Shane would say some very cringy things to the legend in the hopes of garnering heat.
You and the WWF have a lot in common. You're both about to die.
Cringe.
Moments later, it's time for the match, and spoiler alert, it doesn't end by pinfall. This match is overshadowed by the absence of Stone Cold, who had left the WWE the week prior after a disagreement with Vince McMahon, and in storyline everyone is counting on Austin to balance the fight against the Alliance. DDP makes his entrance, Rhyno follows, and the Brothers of Destruction are next. Match happens much the same way as the previous tag match involving Shane happens. Rhyno takes the fall guy role in this match and is the one who gets punished the most. Undertaker and DDP have some nice exchanges between each other. A shame that they never had a chance to have a huge main event one-on-one match after this whole Stalker debacle. As expected, the Alliance would then flood the ring, followed by the WWE faithful, and a huge brawl would evolve inside and outside the ring. It seems that the battle is lost and something cool actually happens. Austin returns to save the day, and Austin is the great equalizer. Austin arrives at the arena via the parking lot, and he would lay waste to everyone that he encountered on his path. Austin is here to save the day, and also at this point the people got the old babyface Austin instead of the creep Austin who played mind games with The Undertaker's wife 2 months prior. This is also a wrestling trope alert moment, but a good one. The hero who arrives late to save the day is something that always works in wrestling and in other media. Austin makes his entrance, the people go insane, the first man he punches in the ring is DDP. Austin clears the ring, beating the crap out of everyone. Stunner party, stereo choke slams, and the WWE stands its ground with the help of the Rattlesnake.
This is such good
On the last Raw broadcast before the Invasion pay-per-view, SmackDown opens with the Alliance in the ring. The usual McMahon nepotism ensues, and Heyman declares death to sports entertainment and death to the WWE.
We will all stand over the grave of the World Wrestling Federation! Death to sports entertainment! Death to the WWE!
Moments later, Jericho wrestles DDP with the NWO referee Nick Patrick screwing Jericho in a match that ends by disqualification. And then some after-match shenanigans happen, leading to Jericho prevailing over DDP. Also in this SmackDown, Tajiri gets enlisted by the Brothers of Destruction for their match against the team of Taz, who is scheduled to lose against Tajiri at the Invasion pay-per-view, and the Hall of Famer tag team, the Dudley Boyz. A corpsing Undertaker does his best not to laugh during this backstage segment.
Sara.
And then the match would carry on as expected, because Tajiri is here to get the brunt of the punishment.
A few minutes later,
Taz would be chokeslammed by The Undertaker, and the first clean win and pinfall in this whole DDP vs Undertaker saga would happen. Wow! I have been watching DDP's and The Undertaker's career since May 28th, and this is the first pinfall win that I observed. And if you needed any more proof that the WWE buried Taz, here it is. Anyway, more nepotism backstage, as Stephanie calls the WWE ineffective.
Stone Cold Steve Austin is ineffective. Kurt Angle is ineffective. The WWF is ineffective. The WWF is ineffective.
Cringe.
And the Booker T and Rhyno match against Angle and Austin would end in interference by the Alliance and the kidnapping of Stone Cold's wife Deborah by DDP. The former WCW champion DDP is now saddled with the horrible gimmick of messing with other wrestlers' wives. And the last thing we see in the broadcast is Stone Cold getting into a limousine to chase DDP. At the Invasion pay-per-view, Deborah explains that DDP left her at the side of the curb in a segment with The Undertaker's wife Sara. Side note, this was a nice touch by the WWE in explaining what happened instead of their usual bullshit of just ignoring it.
Diamond Dallas Page locks me in the trunk of that car, leaves me on the corner.
A few minutes later,
DDP is in a segment with the Alliance leadership. They are pumped up for the match later tonight. The match dubbed the Inaugural Brawl. Yes, inaugural because they plan to milk this bullshit for a long time, and fortunately for us, we know that end would be Survivor Series 2001, 4 months later. Kane and The Undertaker also get some inspiration from Vince McMahon, who does his best to encourage the Brothers of Destruction ahead of the huge brawl. Moments later, the incoherent babbles of the Alliance are heard in a backstage segment.
Get up! Get up! Get up! Get up! We got no choice! We got no
And it's now time for the WWE to face the Alliance. On the Alliance side, Booker T, DDP, Rhyno and the Dudleys. And on the WWE side, Stone Cold, Angle, Jericho, Kane and The Undertaker. If it seems a little lopsided towards the WWE, that's because it actually is.
Life sucks, and then you die.
So after the entrances of about 50 guys and Stephanie McMahon, this brawl would begin as soon as DDP gets to the ring area. Undertaker takes DDP out and we are missing Austin, who makes his entrance amidst the chaos. The match officially starts and the first wrestlers in are Austin and Rhyno. Austin beats down Rhyno, Jericho dominates Rhyno, then Rhyno tags in friend of the channel Booker T, who goes to work on Jericho's chest, which Jericho pays back the very same way. Bulldog on Booker T and then a missile dropkick. In comes Kurt Angle, the absolute beast, who goes to town on Booker T until Booker recovers with a kick and tags in Devon, who delivers the violence to the Olympic champion for a while. Angle recovers and tags the Big Red Machine Kane to punch and kick Devon all over the ring, and a sidewalk slam to a near fall that DDP breaks up. Later in the match, in comes the Phenom to punish Bubba, back all the way to Dudleyville. Bubba reverses, near fall, Undertaker takes out Bubba and then takes a swipe at his nemesis DDP. Undertaker grabs Bubba's arm and goes old school, then cleans the Alliance corner. DDP hangs the Undertaker on the top rope. Bubba uses this to his advantage and then by tagging Rhyno, who beats down the dead man. Then DDP gets tagged in and proceeds to take advantage of the fallen Undertaker. Near fall on Taker, Taker recovers with some fast punches from underneath. Side note, Undertaker punching from underneath always reminds me of the time that JBL brought Mini Undertaker to SmackDown. Off the ropes comes DDP with a boot that Undertaker catches. DDP short clotheslines the Undertaker, near fall, back to their feet. Undertaker runs the ropes, then catches an elbow from DDP, followed by a DDT, and DDP tags in Booker T. Booker gets in the match, punches and scissor kicks The Undertaker and the near fall. Then The Undertaker reverses and drops Booker T. Rhyno saves Booker T, Taker tags in Austin, and Austin beats Booker T all the way outside and a suplex to the floor outside of the ring. Later in the match, Angle gets thrown in the ropes. Awaiting for him is DDP, who tries to swing. Angle punches DDP off the ring into the announce desk. As the match starts to drag, a tag is made to DDP. Powerbomb on Angle by DDP, near fall, Austin breaks it up, and Austin is fired up. Another near fall, Angle kicks out, tag to Bubba, DDP distracts the referee, and Devon flies headfirst into Angle's crotch. And tag to DDP once again. Sleeper on Angle, near fall, the WWE rallies for Angle, who almost suplexes DDP twice. Angle manages to tag Austin, but the referee doesn't see it, giving DDP the time to recover and get back to his corner. Angle gets punished, tag to Rhyno, Diamond Cutter on Angle, and Undertaker interferes, delivering some vicious strikes on DDP. A brawl breaks out, and everyone is in the ring except for Austin. Undertaker in the corner on DDP. Sidewalk slam, Undertaker chokeslam DDP, and signals for the last ride. Referee Charles Robinson.
I'm talking about little nature boy Charles Robinson, you got it?
Attempts to interfere and pays for it by receiving a last ride, giving DDP the opportunity to flee the ring into the crowd. Same shit, different pay-per-view. Undertaker wants payback on DDP and gives chase to DDP amidst the paying audience as the rest of the wrestlers brawl. This match ends with Vince McMahon tossing the championship to Angle. Shane intercepts and hits Vince with the title. Angle drives Shane away from the ring. Bubba receives the same treatment. Angle slam on Booker T followed by an ankle lock. Booker T taps his heart out, but there's no referee to count. Austin drags a referee inside the ring and then turns on Kurt Angle. Austin props Booker T on top of Angle and makes the referee count. Winners of this match, the Alliance, with WWE Champion Stone Cold Steve Austin betraying his team and defecting to the Alliance. Because logic. And this is how the second month of DDP's rivalry with The Undertaker went. After DDP's stalking of The Undertaker's wife Sara and the Inaugural Brawl at the Invasion pay-per-view, the evolving rivalry between The Undertaker and DDP would now take the form of a tag team rivalry. Undertaker would be reunited with his brother Kane, back into the powerful and dominant tag team, the Brothers of Destruction. And on the other side of this rivalry, DDP would be joined by his real-life friend Chris Kanyon in a sort of continuation of both men's previous days as tag team champions in the now defunct promotion WCW. Sadly, Chris Kanyon passed away in 2010 at the young age of 40 years old. At the Invasion pay-per-view, DDP and The Undertaker were last seen exiting through the audience. No explanation is given as to what happened to either man.
Life sucks, and then you die!
And at the following Raw, DDP is backstage with his friend Chris Kanyon, and from this point on, Chris Kanyon would be heavily featured. DDP is explaining the huge gaping plot hole of him kidnapping Deborah and then Steve Austin chasing them away the week prior.
I just had to drive the car. It was so easy. That was all Steve and Deborah. They came up with the whole thing.
Kanyon is attempting to get his gimmick over and does his best to sell his Invasion MVP shirt by claiming that he single-handedly won his six-man tag team match the night before.
I pretty much single-handedly won that match.
John Stasiak from behind. Hugh Morris into the cover.
I was the MVP and I went out, I got this cool shirt made.
He calls this maneuver the alley-oop.
Besides, who's better than Kanyon?
This segment serves the purpose of laying the foundations for the next pay-per-view, which is Summerslam later on the 19th of August 2001. The pairing of Kanyon and DDP will wrestle the Brothers of Destruction in a steel cage, and the four men will wrestle for tag team supremacy over the WCW and WWE Tag Team Championship. 5 minutes later, the Alliance leadership is now in the locker room patting themselves on the back, and the Wild Kanyon appears claiming to be the Invasion MVP. Stone Cold Steve Austin questions Kanyon about the phrase on the back of his shirt.
What's it say on the...
Then Kanyon attempts to explain himself to Austin, and because Kanyon is a former WCW wrestler and WWE wrestlers are constantly booked to hit all over WCW wrestlers, Austin buries Kanyon's gimmick.
I'll tell you who better than Chris Kanyon. Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Kanyon is then forced to retract his catchphrase.
Do you understand that?
Absolutely. Now what I'll say, who better than Kanyon besides Stone Cold Steve Austin?
And Stephanie sends Kanyon away because Kanyon has a match with Chris Jericho, and that match will happen 20 minutes later. Chris Jericho makes his entrance and cuts a promo on Kanyon with the help of the audience.
What's your name, man?
Kevin?
Kevin better than Kanyon?
Gary.
I think Gary better than Kanyon!
Then Jericho gets cut off, and here comes Kanyon, and the violence ensues. During this match, Jericho would get choked by Kanyon's MVP shirt, and after a hard-fought match, Jericho would make Kanyon tap to the walls of Jericho. On the other side of this rivalry, The Undertaker is going to wrestle 25-year-old Rhyno. Undertaker comes out with his wife Sara, and Rhyno follows. Undertaker would pull out his arsenal of classic moves against Rhyno, and then DDP will make his entrance as The Undertaker is preparing to chokeslam poor Rhyno. Rhyno joins Taz in being the only two men so far to lose by pinfall on free TV in this saga, and then The Undertaker notices that DDP is stalking his wife. Classic DDP. Undertaker leaves the ring in spectacular fashion and proceeds to punish the future CEO of DDP Yoga in the middle of the paying audience. Then DDP gets driven back to the ring, and Sara proceeds to kick the crap out of DDP, while The Undertaker goes for a share. Undertaker gets in the ring, drops his share to restrain his wife, but the rate for DDP is too strong to stop, and The Undertaker has to work hard to contain his lovely bride, and eventually Undertaker takes over and punishes DDP with some stiff right hands. DDP then flails all over the ring and attempts to grab The Undertaker's drop share from earlier. Undertaker manages to stop DDP, and as DDP crawls towards Sara, Undertaker swings the chair, but the dastardly DDP pulls Sara in front of the chair, causing The Undertaker to hit his beloved wife.
What? Oh no!
Undertaker carries his wife backstage, and DDP flees the scene of the crime. Minutes later, Coach catches up with DDP, who regrets that Sara got hurt, but then he delivers this line, causing the paying audience to giggle.
Oh my God, to see the anguish in her eyes, I mean the pain, it really turned me on. I mean, it really turned me on, oh my God.
On the following SmackDown, Chris Kanyon would be heavily featured. The Alliance is in the ring gloating about their growing collection of champions. Stephanie McMahon shrieks her way through her announcing duties, and Booker T, who is a double champion ever since the last episode of WCW Nitro early in March, is forced to relinquish one of his titles. And the man to receive the United States title from Booker T is Chris Kanyon. And sadly, this is the only singles title that Chris Kanyon would ever win in his almost 20-year career. I have two problems with this. First, this is a wrestling trope alert moment. The WWE is notorious for making someone champion seemingly out of the blue in the build-up of a pay-per-view. And further into the story, the Brothers of Destruction would win the WCW Tag Team Championship with no build-up. And the same would happen with Kanyon and DDP, who despite being a new tag team, would take the titles from an established tag team, the APA, with no build or story whatsoever. But more on that later. The WWE is only trying to make Kanyon a bigger obstacle for their WWE Golden Boy, The Undertaker, to defeat. And all this because the WWE was probably trying to test Booker T, hoping to see how Booker would react to losing both his titles. Because later in the broadcast, Booker also loses the WCW title to Kurt Angle, but that's a story for another day. But focusing on Kanyon, and further evidence of the disregard for both the story and the characters is that right after SummerSlam, Kanyon would lose a non-title match against Angle, then Kanyon would almost disappear from TV, only to resurface to lose to Tajiri in an open invitation match with also no build-up or story. And after that, sadly Kanyon would be relegated to third string programming like Heat, Velocity, etc. Which leads us to the second problem with simply handling the title to Kanyon in this way. Kanyon receiving the title in 5 seconds, buried in the middle of a 20-minute alliance segment, doesn't do anyone any favors. If they really wanted to give the title to Kanyon without a match, they should have milked that moment for what it's worth. For example, the WWE could have done a version of the finger poke of doom. Stephanie could come out flanked by her brother Shane and the greasy one Paul Heyman. Kanyon and Booker would then be announced by Stephanie, who always gets some heat, and then NWO referee Nick Patrick could officiate the match. Booker would lay down, Kanyon would cover him for the pinfall surrounded by the Alliance leadership, and the heat would be tremendous. But that doesn't happen because logic.
5 minutes later,
Kanyon would be in a backstage segment with Commissioner William Regal and Tajiri, in a questionable product of his time kind of segment that would probably never air today, because in this segment, Tajiri and Regal make fun of Kanyon's speech impediment.
Before I grant you your match, you've got to perform a little test. You've got to say, she sells seashells by the seashore 10 times.
She sells by the seashore. She sells by the...
Cringe.
Kanyon wants a rematch from Jericho, but refuses to put his new title on the line. Regal grants Kanyon a tag team match between the team of Jericho and the always available Tajiri against Kanyon and a partner of his choosing, and Kanyon chooses Rob Van Dam. This filler match would end with RVD flying through the air and pinning Tajiri, keeping the status quo firmly in place. On the other half of this rivalry, The Undertaker is nowhere to be seen, presumably riding quad bikes at his luscious estate. Undertaker's brother, however, has a match with DDP, which is kinda funny because WWE managed to book a singles match between Kane and DDP, but the match that the people wanted to see, a singles match between The Undertaker and DDP, is still missing in action. And spoiler alert, it would actually never happen.
Life sucks, and then you die!
DDP makes his entrance showered in boos from the people. Then Kane follows with his incredible aura and mystique. Both men trade blows, and Kane is fueled by brotherly revenge due to DDP's actions against his kayfabe sister-in-law Sara. DDP would bump and feed for the Big Red Machine, and DDP, despite being at this point 45 years old, moves better than half the roster. And then the match would end in disqualification because nobody ever wins or loses on free TV. Kane would be disqualified by the crooked referee Nick NWO Patrick. Kane would not be satisfied by the result. As Kane confronts NWO referee Nick Patrick, the dastardly DDP hits Kane with the chair. But Kane says "F that" and doesn't sell chair shots. Kane immediately props up to the dismay of DDP, and DDP runs away from Kane. And as usual, a chokeslam is necessary to give the paying audience their money's worth. So the dirty referee Nick Patrick gets chokeslammed by the Big Red Machine, followed by a ring explosion. On the following Raw broadcast, The Rock is coming back to the WWE because he was filming The Scorpion King, and this episode of Raw would revolve heavily on the theme of who will The Rock choose to align with, the Disgusting Alliance or the good old WWE. In the parking lot, the leaders of the warring factions are casually waiting for The Rock to arrive.
Soon! The Alliance! That's what it's all about!
Cringe.
And the wild Chris Kanyon would appear instead.
Who better than Ken? Who better than Ken? Hey, you thought it was going to be The Rock. You thought it was going to be The Rock.
And later in the broadcast, Chris Kanyon would win a match with Lance Storm against the team of Edge and Christian. Side note, The Rock's allegiance would be revealed in the closing moments of the broadcast, and The Rock would deliver his finishing move, the Rock Bottom, to both the Alliance leaders and Vince McMahon. But then The Rock would cut a short promo revealing that he would be aligned with the WWE. Also in this theme episode of Raw, The Undertaker returns from riding quad bikes, and Undertaker along with his brother Kane, the Brothers of Destruction, are wrestling the Dudleys in a tag team ladder match. This would be an effort by the WWE to reposition once again the Brothers of Destruction as a bona fide tag team, because on the next pay-per-view the plan, as explained earlier, is for Kane and The Undertaker to wrestle DDP and Kanyon for all the tag team titles. Ahead of their match with the Brothers of Destruction, the Dudleys are in a backstage segment, proclaiming their intention to inflict damage on The Undertaker's wife by driving Sara through a table.
You can bet your ass that she's going through a table. Where, oh where, will his little Sara be safe? Testify.
Then Dudleys make their way into the ring carrying a table, and the Brothers of Destruction, accompanied by Sara, follow. And this will be a tag team tables match because of reasons. The violence begins and the Brothers of Destruction take the fight to the Dudleys. The common theme in this match is the Dudleys going after The Undertaker's wife and The Undertaker going to the rescue of his damsel in distress. And to no one's surprise, DDP, the bane of Undertaker's existence during this time, would show up to interfere, and DDP shows up to low blow the dead man. Retribution from a couple of weeks earlier when Sara did the same to DDP. Then DDP would manage to grab a hold of The Undertaker's wife, and Bubba props a table in the middle of the ring, then sits in the corner turnbuckle. Then DDP lifts up Sara and props The Undertaker's wife on Bubba's shoulders. Sara resiliently struggles and manages to delay Bubba's offensive moves for enough time that The Undertaker and Kane manage to recover and save Sara from the horrendous trip to the local medical facility yet again. Undertaker grabs a hold of Bubba's neck and sends him flying through a table, and as usual, DDP runs away. Winners of this table match, the Brothers of Destruction. DDP will return to his full-blown creepy Stalker ways on the following episode of SmackDown. In a random locker room backstage, DDP is sitting in the dark obsessing about The Undertaker's wife.
When this all first started, Sara, I just wanted to be famous.
And this is the start of the hilarious backstage shrine that DDP travels with, something that over the coming weeks will evolve and become even more ridiculous. But more on that later.
5 minutes later.
Kanyon is further positioned towards the path of the Brothers of Destruction, because Kanyon is going to have a match with Kane for his United States Championship. But first, he's going to cut a promo. Kanyon says his famous catchphrase, and Kane answers Kanyon's question. And to no one's surprise, this match would end by disqualification at the hands of dirty referee NWO Nick Patrick. And just like the week prior, Kane chokeslams Nick Patrick and then leaves the ring in the coolest way possible. Same different week. An hour later, the last piece of this rivalry, The Undertaker, is with his wife Sara discussing with Commissioner Regal the scheduled Undertaker non-title main event match with Booker T. Angry Undertaker is mad because the match is not for the title, and The Undertaker proclaims that he doesn't need the ego boost from beating Booker. Taker wants the title. Regal tells The Undertaker that the only way that the match becomes for the title is if Booker T agrees to that stipulation. Then The Undertaker leaves.
A few minutes later,
And Booker T is now backstage with Shane. Apparently Booker agreed to a title match because he has something to prove to The Rock, and this is part of their Summerslam build for the main event match that both The Rock and Booker T would have later in August, but that's a story for another day. 5 minutes later, Undertaker, flanked by his lovely wife Sara, enters the ring, and Booker T with the Alliance leader Shane follows. In this 10-minute match, The Undertaker would take the fight to Booker T, and Shane would constantly involve himself in the match. Shane interferes while Undertaker is applying a submission hold on Booker T. Shane shakes the rope, leading to The Undertaker to go balls first into the top rope, and Shane kicks the crap out of The Undertaker while outside of the ring. Eventually, this match would need to end, and as usual, WWE booked themselves into a corner, and neither The Undertaker or Booker T can afford to lose this match fair and square, especially because both wrestlers are scheduled for a notable match at the following pay-per-view. So a convoluted finish with a dozen interferences and 2 referees is what we get. As Booker T is selling in the corner waiting for The Undertaker's offensive move, Shane distracts the referee Tim White, and as The Undertaker charges towards Booker T, Booker grabs the referee towards himself, causing The Undertaker to come crashing into both the referee Tim White and Booker T. The referee is down, Undertaker signals for the chokeslam, and Shane the Coward grabs the arms of The Undertaker's wife Sara. Sara manages to release herself from cowardly Shane, and The Undertaker flattens Shane. Then Sara and The Undertaker take turns beating the crap out of Shane until Booker T shows up with a steel chair. Booker scares Sara away, throws The Undertaker back in the ring, and The Rock comes to the aid of The Undertaker, and The Rock would rock bottom Booker T. Shane then takes The Rock out with a chair and drives Rock to the outside, while The Undertaker in the ring is pinning Booker T for the WCW title win. Tim White slowly counting to 3, but Shane manages to stop the referee's count. Undertaker is now in pursuit of Shane, Shane gets grabbed by the throat, Booker T then strikes The Undertaker with the title, and now The Rock goes to work on Shane. Yet another referee shows up.
I'm talking about little nature boy Charles Robinson. You got it?
Then the Alliance faithful appears to beat up The Undertaker and The Rock and The Undertaker would team up to counter the Alliance advances and stand their ground. On the next episode of Monday Night Raw, DDP would interfere in Kane's match with Rob Van Dam. In a typical short match designed to further develop storylines, RVD and Kane would be fighting for possession of a chair. Both men would drop the chair, move to the corner, and DDP shows up to grab the chair clearly in sight of Kane, who ignores DDP, keeping the kayfabe strong. DDP then swings the chair hard at Kane's back, but Kane says, that. Then Kane turns around and gets hit in the head with the chair, and this time Kane actually sells it. DDP props the chair on Kane's chest, and RVD flies through the air with a 5-star frog splash, landing perfectly on Kane. A win by pinfall. Yay! RVD wins this match, and Kane gets up and chases DDP through the audience, but DDP is too fast for Kane and manages to escape. 30 minutes later, DDP is backstage in his shrine to The Undertaker's wife. Thousands of pictures and some TVs adorn this ridiculous shrine. And I have so many questions. Does DDP travel with candles, photographs and small screen TVs, or does he source them locally from Craigslist? How many extension cords does it take to assemble this shrine? Does he arrive early in the day to assemble all this crap? If so, does he use double-sided tape? No one calls him out for using an entire room for this. The only reason any of this happens is logic. DDP worships his shrine and says he wants his Sara.
I need my Sara.
Moments later, The Undertaker arrives in his grey custom bike with flames on the side, with his wife Sara on the back seat. Kane tells The Undertaker that he needs to thank him for not beating up DDP and waiting for The Undertaker to arrive. Kane tells Undertaker of the existence of this shrine, and Undertaker asks Kane where this shrine is. And then The Undertaker sends Kane on a side quest to leave Sara with the APA for safekeeping. And that's cool because JBL will probably not take advantage of Sara.
Hey, I tell you what, Mr. Barry, you have all the beer you want. You ain't gotta worry about us taking advantage of you, anything like that. Barry, you have all the beer you want. You ain't gotta worry about us taking advantage of you, anything like that.
Both Kane and The Undertaker are supposed to meet up back at this shrine, and this is also a huge wrestling trope alert moment, typical of horror movies.
Now let's split up.
Wait a minute, hold up!
A few moments later.
Undertaker arrives at DDP's shrine and is stunned at what DDP was able to achieve in this locker room. Then Taker grabs his wedding photo and proceeds to attempt to dismantle this horrible shrine. And I say attempt because inanimate objects are The Undertaker's Achilles heel. Like that time, weeks back, that The Undertaker almost did the job for a wooden pallet. Then in the distance, a shadowy figure looms and DDP's voice is heard, but DDP, it is not. It's Kanyon in the worst wig ever, who walks right up to The Undertaker and The Undertaker punches him silly. Then, wrestling trope alert moment, DDP strikes The Undertaker from behind with the kayfabe pipe, and in the nick of time, Kane shows up to save The Undertaker's ass, leading to DDP and Kanyon managing to escape. On the next SmackDown broadcast, in typical WWE fashion, the decision is made to switch the tag team titles with no build, story or anything. On this episode of SmackDown, both the WCW and WWE tag team titles would change hands in a sudden manner, further devaluing the mid-card titles. The APA, composed of Bradshaw, the future wrestling god JBL, and Ron Simmons, are wrestling the team of DDP and Kanyon for the WWE Tag Team Championship. And the WCW Tag Team Champions, Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo, are wrestling the Brothers of Destruction. On the WWE Tag Team title match front, the APA makes their entrance, Kanyon, who is the United States Champion, comes out next, followed by the future CEO of DDP Yoga, who decided to change his ring gear from tight pants to some loose ones. This match will start with DDP getting his ass handed to him by Ron Simmons. Then DDP tags in Kanyon, who gets a sweet follow-away slam from Bradshaw. And because this is airing on free TV, interference is mandatory. A wild Test appears to kick Simmons' head off, and in the ring, with a sweet clothesline from hell, JBL takes Kanyon's head out. And as Bradshaw covers Kanyon, the referee is absent. In comes Test to hit Bradshaw in the head with the title, Kanyon then covers Bradshaw, and DDP and Kanyon win by pinfall and become the new WWE Tag Team Champions. 5 minutes later, in a backstage segment, DDP and Kanyon are thanking Test for his assistance in helping them win the WWE Tag Team Championships. And this is where the cage match for Summerslam would be announced by Regal. On the other side of this rivalry, the team of Kane and The Undertaker would mirror Kanyon and DDP's actions and win the opposite brand's titles. Ahead of that match, Palumbo and O'Haire would be on a backstage segment with Stone Cold Steve Austin, who builds up the two men. And with this newfound encouragement, Palumbo and O'Haire would then march to the office of WWE Commissioner William Regal to demand a match with whoever is available. And 30 minutes later, the WCW Tag Team Champions Palumbo and O'Haire would come down to the ring looking as bland as a banana. Then, surprise surprise, Palumbo and O'Haire pulled the shortest straw and now have to contend with the Brothers of Destruction.
What? Oh no!
This is also a wrestling trope alert moment. Wrestler in the ring challenging someone in the locker room, only for the worst ever option to appear.
There isn't anyone in the back of that locker room that I can't beat!
Sounds like it. That takes the... Oh my! Oh my!
Unfortunately for us and the story, this match would end with a pinfall win and no interference. A breath of fresh air in a sea of mediocrity. In the closing moments of the match, after a sidewalk slam on O'Haire, Kane would grab Palumbo and O'Haire for a choke slam, which Palumbo and O'Haire would reverse, The Undertaker would then even the odds, and the match would end with stereo choke slams. Pinfall for the win, and new WCW Tag Team Champions, the Brothers of Destruction. On the following Raw broadcast, Stone Cold and the Alliance opened the show in a segment that I shall now call the Burial of Taz. After Stone Cold congratulates the new WWE Tag Team Champions, DDP and Kanyon, along with Taz to defected to the Alliance because of reasons, Taz would be targeted because of his lack of intestinal fortitude, and not coming to the aid of Shane McMahon as Shane was being driven through a table by The Rock. Taz would attempt to fight back, but eventually the rest of the Alliance would gang up on Taz and beat down the human suplex machine. 15 minutes later, DDP and Kanyon are backstage trying to hype O'Haire and Palumbo for their cage match later tonight with the Brothers of Destruction. O'Haire and Palumbo make their entrance, the Brothers of Destruction follow, accompanied by Sara. Undertaker gets in the ring and immediately the heel strike. Blocking the entry is The Undertaker and Kane attempts to climb the cage, but Kane gets kicked out of the cage by O'Haire. Then O'Haire gets a door to the face courtesy of Kane. Now inside the cage is Kane, and Kane chokeslams O'Haire. All this while The Undertaker has been pummeling Palumbo. The Brothers of Destruction are in control of this match. The former WCW stars are being treated as jobbers because they kind of are. Out from the gorilla position appear DDP and Kanyon, and both men remain steadfast on the top of the ramp as the Brothers of Destruction continue to work on WCW's Blandest Tag Team. As O'Haire attempts to climb the cage, Kane follows. O'Haire falls down the cage outside of camera view, and Palumbo is bleeding from the forehead, and later in the match, as DDP and Kanyon approach the ring, Palumbo would get a last ride. DDP suddenly remembers that his gimmick is to chase Sara, and Sara is all alone outside of the ring, and the Brothers of Destruction are trapped inside.
What? Oh no!
Sara tries her best to run away and starts to climb the cage. Spider-Woman Sara gets to the top of the cage in under 3 seconds. Then DDP and Kanyon give chase, but The Undertaker uses Palumbo as a battering ram to knock DDP and Kanyon out of the cage. Kane pins O'Haire, Undertaker climbs the cage and joins his lovely bride. In the last episode before the confrontation between the Brothers of Destruction and DDP and Kanyon, the Dastardly Heels are wrestling the team of Christian and Edge, who at this point are heading to their eventual demise. Kanyon comes out, bang, and DDP is here, and another short match typical of this era would ensue. Fun fact, DDP would actually have a rivalry months later with Christian ahead of their WrestleMania 18 match, but that's a story for another day. Match evolves and the level of ring work that 45 years old DDP still performs at is great. Granted, he started late, but Mother Nature is a bitch, and even though DDP is getting up there in age, his ring performance doesn't really show it. And later in the match, Edge rolls Kanyon as the NWO referee Nick Patrick ignores. And because this is free TV, you already know that this will end with interference. And after Christian takes out DDP and goes for some shares, Lance Storm, who is wrestling Edge at Summerslam, appears to superkick Edge, leading to Christian chasing Storm and Kanyon almost pinning Edge, who kicks out at 2.5. And eventually, moments later, DDP Diamond Cutters Edge and Kanyon pins Edge to win this match. 5 minutes later, Kane, Undertaker and Sara get interviewed by Coach. Undertaker gets asked about his feelings and The Undertaker tells Coach that he's going to kick DDP's ass this Sunday.
Diamond Dallas, oh my God, is Undertaker gonna kick my ass on Sunday Page?
Then The Undertaker talks about Kanyon, says that he shows some promise.
Why a young man with so much promise would want to get locked in a cage with this?
Then The Undertaker delivers the worst pun ever.
Because really, who badder than Kane?
Go yourself.
And we are finally here. The final confrontation in the form of a tag team match instead of an awesome singles match between The Undertaker and DDP. Ahead of that match, the Brothers of Destruction are shown walking backstage, accompanied by Sara, and the ominous cage music plays while a recap of previous events is shown to catch up the audience on the events leading to this moment. The dual champion Kanyon makes his entrance, DDP does his kayfabe gimmick shtick, and then bangs, and the dual theme combo of Kane and The Undertaker would play next. Everyone shakes the cage while entering, and after the four men are inside, The Undertaker closes the door, and Sara, who apparently is a WWE official now, locks the cage door and then keeps the key on her bra. Classy. The bell rings and immediately the heels attempt to flee. DDP is taken down, then hits the side of the cage, and Kanyon is sent to his doom all the way from up the cage. The brawl evolves and the good guys are in control. Big boot to DDP, and Kane is choking Kanyon with his foot. DDP attempts to gain the advantage on The Undertaker, but The Undertaker subverts DDP. DDP kicks The Undertaker and a low blow to The Undertaker, followed by some cage wall scrapping. Then a clothesline for a near fall, and Kanyon manages to leave Kane out of action for a while. Now they switch opponents, and Kanyon is now at the mercy of The Undertaker, and DDP is getting his ass kicked by Kane. Down are Kanyon and DDP, and another switch, and The Undertaker is now working on DDP, and Kane is now on Kanyon. Kanyon gets thrown over the top rope, Undertaker grabs DDP by the head and feeds him to the cage once again. Kanyon attempts to jump off the top rope, but gets caught and eats a choke slam. DDP gets thrown as a lawn dart to the cage. Kane then drives Kanyon to the cage's corner, and The Undertaker gets some momentum courtesy of his brother Kane and rams DDP on the cage. Then off the ropes comes Taker with an intense boot to DDP. Undertaker then tries again to come off the ropes to inflict damage on DDP, but Kanyon manages to take out The Undertaker. As Kanyon attempts to escape in the corner, Kane attempts a powerbomb on Kanyon. Kanyon manages to drop Kane, and DDP gives a DDT to The Undertaker. Kane and The Undertaker are down as the heels attempt to climb the cage. Kane and Taker rise from the dead and give chase to their foes. The Undertaker kicks DDP out of the corner, and DDP falls to his doom, square on his family jewels. Undertaker signals Kane to let Kanyon go, as The Undertaker reaches inside the pockets of the cage structures to remove some conveniently placed chains. Kanyon manages to leave the cage, leaving DDP all alone in the middle of the ring, flanked by Kane and The Undertaker. The Brothers of Destruction drop DDP, Kane hits DDP in the corner, Undertaker then throws DDP to the opposite corner, sidewalk slam by The Undertaker on DDP, near fall, and The Undertaker is not done yet with DDP and unbreaks the referee's count himself. Undertaker now pummels DDP in the corner, and The Undertaker would now use the chains he had procured earlier to choke DDP into the cage wall, then chokeslam on DDP as DDP begs for his life. The babyface Undertaker now comes to reason and tells DDP to get out of the cage and not look at his wife ever again, or risk facing the ire of the American Badass.
Get your ass out of here, I'll let you live. You ever look at her again, I'll kill you.
Cowardly heel DDP starts to climb the cage, and it was all a ruse. Undertaker grabs DDP by the throat, and DDP gets chokeslam, and The Undertaker signals for the last ride while pointing to his wife Sara. Last ride on DDP, and The Undertaker pins DDP to win this match and gain revenge on his wife's foe. And the icing on the cake, the Brothers of Destruction become dual tag team champions. Thank you for watching this trip down memory lane regarding The Undertaker and DDP, right? What? There's more? What do you mean there's more? Caralho! DDP apparently got injured during his cage match the previous night, so in order to button up the story, a match is set up between Sara and her former foe, DDP, because Logic. Ahead of their crappy match, Sara would be shown shadowboxing and DDP gets interviewed by Michael Cole. DDP says he wasn't successful and that he's hurting after being in the cage the previous night.
I am hurting like hell off that cage.
DDP wants to get his hands on Sara in front of her husband Undertaker, and more footage of Sara backstage warming up for her match would be shown as The Undertaker hypes his wife. 5 minutes later, DDP comes out, selling and stumbling down the arena ramp. Undertaker would make his entrance in his black custom bike with his wife seated behind him. Sara gets in the ring and The Undertaker stands outside watching. DDP offers Sara the first shot, and Sara takes it. DDP then gets another shot from Sara, then DDP pushes Sara, leading to The Undertaker attempting to interfere. Then Sara attempts to punch DDP with the moves that she learned from the Rocky movies. DDP pushes Sara to the corner, and The Undertaker gets an elbow to the face, courtesy of DDP. DDP then gets grabbed by The Undertaker and dragged out of the ring. Undertaker then punches DDP outside, chokeslam on the outside, and now the bell rings to start this match. Sara pins DDP and wins this match, and off goes DDP to take care of his injury for the next few months. And this is how the rivalry between DDP and The Undertaker ended. Thank you for watching this long trip down memory lane regarding The Undertaker and Diamond Page rivalry. Leave your comments, suggestions, ideas or constructive criticism in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to press that like button and also subscribe for more future content just like this. Or better, this has been fun. Thank you for watching.